and are just some of the words that you may hear in today's podcast. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome to the Perfect Information Podcast, a board game podcast basking in the glow of the mellow springtime sun with me, Yorgos Panagiotidis, and that hollow space between a rock and a hard place,
Ben Maddox.
Is it okay to take off my hazmat suit?
Yes, you probably can, yes.
I said, is it okay to take off my hazmat suit?
It is now, yeah.
Oh, that's good, because I took it off then, and if it hadn't have been...
Well, I was lying, but yeah, now it's too late.
What
anyway.
have you given me, Georgios?
Strep mostly.
What's strep?
Streptococcus. It's a strep throat, basically.
Strap-on cocken?
Yes, streptococcus, which
that sounds very sexy, Georgios.
It is totally. It's basically your the back of your throat is inflamed.
Ooh, it certainly is.
You're usually in pain, and you can't properly speak.
God,
it's so much fun. It's basically the application to become the GIMP.
Sounds like every Thursday night for me, Georgios. Know what I mean? Ooh, stick it down my throat. Ooh. Hello, and welcome to the Shit Comedy Show with Ben and Georgios. You like shitty crap double entendre crap jokes? We've got them coming out of our ears. And also...
No, you see, you messed it up. We have it coming out of our arse.
Oh, yes, sorry, because our jokes, in the same way as diarrhea, flow out, but they're also liquid shit.
Did you hear about the guy who had Make America Great Again tattooed on his asshole?
Did he?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is.
How'd you make America great again?
Apparently lots and lots of diarrhea.
Verbal.
Either, doesn't matter. Yeah, it must be really, really painful to ever get a tattoo there.
What, on your actual arsehole?
Yeah.
Wow. I've got one on my arm and that was really painful.
Yeah.
You've got one on your haven't you? That's.
I have one, yes. It says, here stands Yorgos the Great, the probably mightiest warrior of all the Hellenic Empire and parts of Germany.
It's called the old Greek passport, isn't it?
That as well, yeah.
You have to have it when you're a kid.
Yes.
It's like a barcode. And they go, oh, you're Greek. Ding, ding.
Pretty much, yeah.
Malalachas, which is Greek for thank you.
Yes. Again, you speak all the languages.
So, Georgios, what are we talking about this week?
A bunch of things, but I want to bring up something because it's a small anecdote and I will find a way to segue into a proper topic.
You better bloody add.
Yeah.
Because my segues are always very smooth like butter.
Yes, like talking about assholes and stuff. Anyway, I was invited the other day to a kind of, I don't know how to call it.
Swingers party.
More or less, but gaming oriented. There was this guy who's about to start a Kickstarter a few months from now. He's based here in Berlin. He had this idea of developing a deck of cards. Basically, he took the first 5 digits of the binary code, gave him a symbol, and basically had his cards numbered 1 to 32, I think, using a combination of these symbols. It's mathy, very, very clean and clever, what have you. He basically came up with 22 at least distinct games to play with his deck of cards, or the number of these decks of cards. And he's going to launch a Kickstarter, and we played a bunch of those games. And it was quite interesting because one of those games was actually really good. It was like, I think 95% finished. But he had these other games as well. And we were playing them, and I realized he doesn't actually have games there, as he has a deck of cards with which to sort of prototype the mathematical underpinnings of a game.
So it's for him, it feels like an academic exercise as opposed to the production of an artistic work.
Yes, I think he's very much focused on the maths, the underlying maths of a board game, of a card game in this case. And there's some nice ideas in there. But what he's actually lacking, and I don't think he realizes it, and I unfortunately wasn't in a position to tell him because he doesn't know me and I can't sort of shoot down his great ideas or he's spending.
You can.
I can.
Oh, I do.
You probably would. And he has these ideas for these games he came up with. They are solid. They need work, but they are solid. There was like this trick-taking game. There was an area majority game. There was a ship combat game. The one game that I thought was almost finished was a 2-player tactical game called, I think the German word for switchboard, where you need to sort of flip.
Switch and boarden.
Yes, switchboard is the German word for switchboard. That's true. Basically, you have to flip over these cards and combine them to, like these symbols to combine the cards you see in front of you. And the clue is basically the card you switch, your opponent cannot switch this turn. So basically it becomes this tactical maneuvering game. It's really quite clever. Needs a little bit of work because as it is, it's a bit dry.
Are you telling me a card deck system based upon the binary system without any theme and just a number of symbols might be a little bit dry?
I know it's a bit of a reach, but that was the impression I had, yeah. If any of the listeners are interested, I think he has a website out, a basic website called Binar Cards, as in binary without the Y. To give you a rough idea, I think it's in German and English, but I don't know. It's fascinating because the point I'm trying to make, and this is where actually I'm starting just to go into the segue. But yeah, I watched him explain these games. I watched him get excited about, ooh, look how smart it is, look how clever it is. And I thought that was it so exemplified a certain strand of gamers I've met and gamers I've been as well. So I'm not just judging other people. I've been like this as well. The fascination with the puzzle of the game, with the challenge, with the mathematics, with the strategies, basically everything that is sort of easily graspable with a logical mind, if you want to call it that. It's so appealing and it's exciting and it's invigorating. I saw it in him, and I remember doing this myself, that you lose sight of everything else that is part of the board game experience. That you lose sight, like you said, the theme, it matters. It's not just, dressing to sell more copies. It enhances the experience. It makes it lively. It makes it an experience in itself instead of a math puzzle.
Well, I mean, what's really interesting, and this is why Knizia gets grief, and probably his later output is guilty of this, is that, there is this, for want of a better term, and I do apologise, X factor into works of art. And there's something that swaps a sort of bodice ripper into a great profound work of literary historical fiction. There is something that transforms a game from a broad collection of mathematically rigorous mechanics into an immersive experience that's rewarding.
Yeah.
And whatever that is, whether that's, an artistic interpretation, whether that's an understanding of what lies above these things.
Or, a little pinch of chaos.
Or a little pinch of chaos. This is it. There are some people who just are bewitched by the pure engineering, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But it's not the whole story, right?
Exactly. And I think this is how we slowly get to the segue. The idea that there are certain, I'll call them, weaknesses inherent to the hobby that we occasionally forget about. I mean, like I said, I used to be, enthralled with these maths, with the engineering and stuff like that for a long time. And eventually I sort of, my appreciation of games changed. I sort of started seeing, pretentious as it may sound, more layers to what it was like playing a game, what I liked about playing a game. I saw more of what I drew sort of meaning out of. I saw more of what sort of fed into my enjoyment of the moment of playing this game with other people. That sort of, this broadening of my perspective meant basically that I could look back onto my own gamer past and realize I was missing out on something really great there. And it took me a while. I couldn't really reconstruct how I got to the point where I saw, wow, there's more to this.
Well, we mature, don't we? I mean, we mature in every aspect of our life.
Yeah, we're like bananas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because I'm all sort of brown and fleckly at the moment.
Yes.
And underneath that, a gaunt yellow colour. And I smell, weirdly, of bananas.
Very sugary, yeah.
But the thing is, it's that thing, isn't it? We mature in everything that we do. It's that old 10,000 hours thing. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that being a gamer is the same as learning to be a carpenter or a physicist or something like this.
No, it's much better.
Exactly. But we go through, and we've talked about it, you go through these phases and you become very absolutist in certain phases of your game playing. You go, this is what I love. So for me, it was when I discovered Euros, it was like, this is what I love. There is nothing else. These games are the things that do it for me, and I cannot see that any other aspect of the hobby has any real value. But that's sophomore-ish, it's immature, it's teenage, and as you grow older, and I don't mean physical sort of temporal age, but just within the hobby, within the playing of the games, you realize that there are so many things that have value, and you realize that those Eurogames, and they're still primarily the games I love, but those Eurogames that you really love that have something, it's not boil downable to this simple equation where you put an input into a machine and at the end comes out a great game, right? There's something else in it.
Yeah, I think the idea of games being pure or being somehow better does not ring true for me anymore. I think I like the imperfections of these games. I appreciate them, even if I think some of these imperfections lead to a flawed experience. I appreciate them because it's part of what makes them unique. I mean, we keep joking about Twilight Imperium, how much I love it and how much you don't care for it. And I would never argue that it does not have flaws. It has huge flaws, but there's this undeniable joy and just excitement that this game can generate in me.
And that's where the interest lies, right? Because I think you're wrong, pretty much, broadly speaking. But this is where the interest lies. This is why people talk about these things.
Right.
And this is why the phrase, well, that's just my opinion, is one of the most useless phrases ever uttered by humanity. Because if you just allow people to have their opinion, they say things and you go, all right, fair enough, that's your opinion. But no, it's that interchange of ideas. The thing, it's not even necessarily trying to persuade the other person of your point, but the sheer visceral joy of arguing to opposing points and clarifying those ideas for yourself so you can then go away and develop them and grow as a person.
I think
that's a wonderful thing, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. I think the reason why I'm not very fond of this, it's my opinion phrase, is that it's usually a way of sort of shutting down further inspection, further consideration of these thoughts.
It's intellectually limiting at the basis level, right?
It's basically saying, I'm marking what I just said as, well, I'm marking this off. We are not going to talk about this. We're not going to question it. We're not going to think about it. We're not going to talk about the implications. We're not going to talk about the causes, because it's just my opinion. It's apparently absolutely relative and interchangeable, which is, I think, one of the most, poisonous thoughts you can have about opinions.
Relativism is absolutely terrible because it assumes that we then can't say, this is crap, this is good. It assumes we can't say things like, the bold and the beautiful is bad and Shakespeare is good.
Because that's wrong. Bold and Beautiful is, a milestone in English literature. And Shakespeare was a hack. We all know that.
And the point is, it's sort of culturally responsible for us to come together and say certain things are good, certain things are bad. And what lies in between is where the spark lies, where the debate lies. That's what's exciting.
Maybe, yeah.
And the simple interchange of disagreeing ideas is the crackle between human beings, and it asserts our individuality but also stamps our membership in a group that we desire to be a part of, right?
Yeah.
And what we want to talk about today is the limitations that this particular medium has. Things that we find about the hobby that is frustrating. And by the hobby, I mean the games themselves, intrinsic to the games, but also the world that exists around it. And so, Georgios,
yes.
Do you have something?
I do. I think, you probably know British comedy series, The IT Crowd.
Yes.
They had this episode where one of the characters has a board game show on YouTube. It's making fun of a certain quality of board games and board game media to a certain extent. But most of all, it sort of takes the impression people have of the hobby to an extreme. And the impression is basically, and I think this is where one of the actual weaknesses of the hobbies lie, is that it is very, very dull.
Right.
And I think I'm of the opinion that we need to acknowledge that there's a certain dryness and dullness to the activity of playing a board game. I think it is very idealistic to claim that's not the case. We are sitting at a table together. We're pushing.
What do you mean by dull, though? Dull for who?
No. I understand I understand where you're going with it, but I want to shelve this question for a moment.
Okay.
I want to sort of expand where I think the dullness lies, and which I think we can't really deny. It is the activity of playing the game itself is not particularly involving. It's not very physically involving. It's not dynamic. It's not very exciting. The activity itself is very much, you play a card, you put a meeple there, you look through your hand, or you shuffle a few cards. It's all
you
very,
unironically say words like meeple.
Yes, for example, like that. These are all very, well, they're dull activities. They're not very dynamic, but
you're gonna have to define before you carry on. Define what you mean by dull, because I don't understand what you mean by dull. Do you mean visually unarresting?
They're physically very, very, what's the word? Low energy to use, the common presidential vernacular.
You're not waggling your groin at people when you take moves then?
Well, you're not running, you're not tackling, you're not necessarily screaming, you're not...
Oh, I know I am, George.
I know.
I literally am.
Yes, but...
every moment of the livelong day and during my night terrors.
That's a nice image. I'm not... And of course, there are a lot of examples that go the other direction. There are games that are very shouty, they're very... Avalon can become very tense. I'm not saying not all games are like this, but the impression exists that board games are a very tepid affair. They're very... They're things that shut-ins do. They're things that, people with low social skills do. They're people that, want to avoid actually dealing with human beings. They sort of focus on the little wooden pieces and get excited about trading silk for 3 coins as opposed to trading marble for 2.5 coins. These are, if we're being like really, really blunt about this, the trappings of board games can seem very dull.
Well, this is...
But, and I'll finish the thought and then you can come in. The experience, and we've talked about this a lot, and I love talking about it, is not. And this gap between what you see and what you experience is a limitation to the hobby in that it makes it difficult for somebody who isn't already bitten by the bug to understand why it's exciting.
And this is the point. This is why I asked the question, dull for who, right?
Yeah.
Because I think what you're trying to say is that a neutral observer standing in a room watching people play board games sees, especially a certain type of game, sees a group of people doing small physical actions once every 40 seconds and not really talking much, right?
Yeah.
And of course it's that thing. I think if you were to go to the academy in Athens in 300 BC...
Right.
What would you see? People sitting around reading books or thinking. It's from an outside perspective, it's dull. You're drawing the distinction between the external and the outside.
Oh, yeah.
And the internal world, right? The observer and the observed.
Yeah. And my point is that it's a limitation because it...
For who, though?
It's a limitation that keeps people out. It's a limitation that makes the attractiveness of the hobby, the joy, the energy of the hobby somehow obscure. I think there's a reason why... the most well-known live play videos, the ones that are, most popular and actually generate a lot of attention or get a lot of attention, are the ones that make an effort to externalize what we do. Look at Tabletop. Look at some of the great Shut Up and Sit Down live plays. They all put a lot of energy into externalizing the experience.
But of course the point is, there are some things that are for spectators and some things that aren't, right? And board games aren't for spectators. And what that does, of course, is it puts board games into the realm of these eccentric little peccadillos that elderly academics have, like the Times crossword, like these thick Sudoku books and all of this. And yeah, it is a drawback on the game that by simply observing what people do doesn't convey what is actually going on.
But which is basically what you have to do if you're not already in the hobby. The only thing you can do is observe what other people do. So if you have the opportunity of visiting, say, a board game meetup, and people are deep in thought playing, let's say, very thinky games as opposed to very, very boisterous, loud games, this is the impression that you get.
But that's the beauty about games, though, because it's not your only choice, is it? You can actually,
you
can actually sit down and play something. That's the fundamental beauty of it. And the thing is, it's this magic circle thing, isn't it? When outside the magic circle, you see a group of people. It's like you always see photos of guitarists
Right.
And the photo of a guitarist is the worst fucking thing for portraying the energy of that guitarist in the world. You always see just a bloke with long hair and his finger on a particular part of the guitar, and it's static and unmoving. Whereas when you see it actually moving, there is a dynamism and a energy to that. Once you enter that magic circle, there's a dynamism, there's an energy, there's a crackle between people, and that's what board games can offer.
Oh, yeah, no.
Is that ability to be able to come in and participate, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. But my argument is basically that taking this step, getting past this barrier is a hurdle. And I think it's a hurdle that a lot of us have forgotten that we've taken at some point, that we've mastered with ease and forgotten what it was like to look on from the outside. I do think this is a limitation of the hobby. I think it's quite impressive that a lot of people are discovering board games after childhood.
But how do you, and this is not part of the subject, we're not talking about the limitations of the hobby and how to fix them, but it's an inevitable question to be asked. Is there a fix for that?
I think there may be. The reason I mentioned these Let's Plays and why I think they work well is because they work on making the joy, the excitement visible to the observer, showing how it is fun, how you're not just personally, lost in your own thoughts, thinking and enjoying the tension and the difficulty of a decision, or you enjoy making long-term plans or short-term plans, or trying to get into other people's heads, which is all fantastic, but it's all very internal. And somebody watches you, they're just seeing you with maybe a pained expression on your face and not really noticing that you're having fun.
But what's really interesting with games, I think, actually, because we live in this niche of a hobby, we assume games are niche in themselves, and they're not. Actually, people play games all the time.
Yeah.
People are constantly, whether they be digital games, whether they be board games, most people have experience with board games, usually bad board games. And what's really interesting is we would never say this thing about reading.
Yes, but there are historical reasons for that. But yeah, go on.
Right, I agree. There are historical reasons, and somewhere along the line, there has been this shift where play has been considered something only for kids.
Right.
And it's never empirically been that way. People have always played. I mean, remember as a kid, sitting around playing cards with 60-year-old people, And so what games offer us is this unique opportunity to be involved and to understand. I don't think it's the hermetic nature of sitting and playing a game that is distancing. I think it's a stronger social notion that these people are nerds that is much more pernicious and much more of a barrier. Things instilled in teenage that carry on over into adulthood.
I agree that this attitude exists. I find myself far more dismissive and militant towards it than I think you do. I think
well, it exists, right? And it's a
it
factor.
exists, yeah. But I think I can't take people seriously who believe that.
Right.
I just dismiss their opinion.
But so many people do still.
Yes, but
it's just a fact.
Yeah, I know. But I'm just saying I can't really get, like I said, the moment somebody sort of shows that they think play is for kids and board games are for children, I just go, yeah, nice talking to you, man.
Yeah, but the problem is it's never been elucidated to them. And this notion of play, this notion of play and this notion of sport, because I think you can bring them together. There comes a certain point when you hit adulthood where they say, okay, sport, which, you can extend games, are to be spectated. And only certain types of sport are to be spectated because society accepts certain types of sport.
Like snooker. I've loved watching snooker.
And you get to a certain age where you no longer participate. It's not seemly to participate anymore. This is a broad social issue, and to dismiss and say, I know it's frustrating and people seem very superficial and ignorant on these cases, but the fact is we're socially conditioned to stop participating at a certain age. It's like that.
I'm not sure actually I agree entirely. I think what we're seeing, especially in the last 15, 20 years, especially with the economics of video games taking over.
Right.
I think we are seeing the idea that games, even something as hyper nerdy as video games used to be, because in my memory at least, I might be wrong, but the way I remember it, board games used to be less nerdy than video games. And that changed dramatically. Nowadays, the entire thread culture is very, very, it has become part of the visible face, for good or ill, of video games.
Well, what's really interesting is you look at video games, and I think, I'm 40 now, right? And I think it's inconceivable, if I think back to my parents when they were 40, that they would be playing video games. When I was a kid and I was playing video games, it was, oh, bloody hell, what are you doing with that bloody silly shit? You know what I mean? Inconceivable. And what's happened is that we've grown up and we've seen the maturation of video games with the maturation of the players since the 80s. And now it's perfectly acceptable for men, women with 2 or 3 kids who are adults, who have proper jobs, to sit down and play video games, right? And that's a convenience thing as much as anything. You can sit down with your kids and play a video game. Board games, there's a sense of event, there's a sense of having to get people round. And the thing is, adults are completely bloody joyless, and they've never got time to do things they like, right? It seems to me that adulthood is about bleaching the colour out of your existence.
I think that's ageism.
No, our society sort of dictates that you have to be sensible. You can't do these things anymore. And this is changing. It's changed with video games, and I think we will see actually the fruits of this current board game boom later on down the line, where you will see the 18-year-olds who are playing now will normalise it for those who come after.
Oh yeah. I think this is also part of the reason why I can't take people seriously who make this demarcation between, childs, adults, and board games on one side of this border and everything else on the other side. I think there's just a lack of, there's just, these people have a lot of other issues about who they are. And,
but you go into Amazon, right?
Yeah.
Where do you find the board games?
I don't remember.
In the toy section. You go into shops. Where do you find the board games? In the toy section. The point is, I'm looking at my shelf of games now, and there are so many things that are so removed from toys in the fact that they're serious sort of adult intellectual pursuits.
Right.
A 7-year-old kid, it's not like a Fisher-Price garage, right? A 7-year-old kid can't harness the complexities. I mean, I can't either, but that's a different thing. Harness the complexities and the strategies and the different things you have to do. But still, that game, which I consider a finely wrought adult piece of work, is stuck next to the fucking dolls, right?
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at dedicated board game shops, I'm just talking about the ones in Berlin here because those are the ones I know best. They do have shelves full of, advanced or, complex strategy games or, things that are not for kids. They have a kids section, yeah, of course, because why shouldn't kids play with games? But they also have a not kids section.
Because they know what they're talking about because they're a dedicated board game shop, and by and large, they're niche shops that few people go into, right?
Maybe, but I think I remember now that one of these was a department store chain thingies here in Berlin. They have a board game space as well, and yes, it bleeds into the kids shops as well, but I think that's legitimate. I think it's completely fair. It doesn't have to be like next to the electronics and next to the washing machines and I don't know, the kitchen appliances. It's perfectly fair to be close to the kids stuff because there is sort of a fluid barrier from playing with toys, playing with games, growing up, playing with more complex games, playing with more interesting games, playing with, more engaging, deeper, complex, heavy games.
But there is a fluid thing from starting with a little toy xylophone to a little plastic guitar to Guitar Hero to actually playing proper instruments and being a legitimate musician. And we don't say stick the violins next to the bloody Barbie dolls, do we? And I think, games, proper strategy games are as different from a Barbie doll as a violin is from a Barbie doll. And the thing is, it's a perception thing.
Yes, it's culturally grown, sure, but I'm not too fussed about this distinction anymore. I used to worry. I used to get very annoyed at these things, get angry even.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't give a shit whether more people come into the hobby. To be honest,
I do.
I have my group and they're lovely people, and frankly, I don't care about anyone else because I've got to an age where I don't want to speak to any more people. Now I've met all the people I want to meet. Thank you.
No, I think I want more people to come into the hobby because I think board games have something to offer, something of merit that more people should know about. The way I feel the same way about books and about films, about TV. These media have things to offer that are culturally significant, that can help you personally, and they give you some sort of social capital that just keeps you tied into your society, into your culture.
I hope that I have a lot of friends who, especially Berlin, a cool city and that. I have a lot of friends who find this whole deal very bizarre and wish to distance themselves.
I'm going to be very mean now. You need better friends.
No, I mean, they're lovely people.
They are probably, but they apparently have flaws.
Doesn't fucking everybody?
No.
I mean, apart from you, Georgios, that goes without saying. But I'm hoping that generation, and they're all sort of mid-30s, early 40s, I'm hoping that generation is the sort of outlier now, the last sort of bastion of that demarcation that we have between things that are seemly and things that aren't, things that are childish and things that aren't. And that you can understand that there are certain things that may not conform to your conception of cool, but that have incredible value.
But honestly, isn't that one of the most juvenile things you can imagine?
Absolutely.
Worrying about how you come across and if you're cool enough.
Absolutely, but no question on earth, it's something that we never shake. We never shake, no matter how old we get. What our conception of desirable, what our conception of cool is, and it changes. The word changes to seemly or respectable or whatever, and it changes from a pair of trainers to a big car. But nevertheless, it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same impulse.
I think at some point, you either become self-determined or you let other people's opinion change you.
And the thing is, I mean, we're all prone to other people's opinions, but you can never have them. You can never have the freedom to assert your own opinion and be happy with your own opinion until people help you with that. If you're someone who is so crippled by this desire to be accepted by whatever social group you want to be a part of, until someone just takes you by the hand and says, "That's all right. It's all right, don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And so to just say, "Oh, these people are idiots." I mean, yes, their attitudes are idiotic. It doesn't stop them being idiotic, though.
Oh, no. But, it does question how much time you want to spend with people because, you can't save everyone.
And, there are people, the thing is, though, I don't want to play games all the time. Not every single moment. Because I don't understand. Wait, how? Why? Well, firstly, I've got to have time to masturbate, and that takes up a lot of my time.
Obviously, you're playing the wrong game.
Secondly, I've got to take up a lot of time to opine. Do you know?
That is. Yeah, but again,
sometimes I can do that over games,
but
sometimes there's a pure, unadulterated joy of just sitting with my belly hanging over my groin, on a chair in front of some people, and just opining and telling them, Georgios, and they go, and I go, no. Don't interrupt me. I'm talking, Georgios.
Yes, I noticed.
I'm talking.
That's why I'm trying to stop you.
Yeah, but I'm opining. But the point is, I don't want to play games all the time, and there are people who I value very much as very intelligent people who just aren't into games. And there are some who think it's terribly nerdy and very embarrassing, and they don't want to talk to me about it. And when I start talking about it, you see them sort of look to the floor and, can we talk about football now? But there are other people who just aren't into it.
I have to correct myself. I still get angry at that kind of reaction. I thought I was over it, but I'm not.
I accept it because I was. I always had this inner nerd burning inside me ever since I was like a 7-year-old kid, and one of my friends introduced me to 40k, and it lay dormant for many, many years and really flourished sort of in my mid-30s with board games, right? And I think part of it is the self-contained nature of a board game, that you can get the experience without having to invest your entire life. I mean, minis games, role-playing games, they suck so much time, that's why board games are so popular. I've always had that inner nerd, but I certainly did go through a phase of finding the whole thing very arcane, very absurd, and very undesirable.
Well, but I think, we're going, full circle, because my argument basically is there's a certain layer of board games that are arcane and they are absurd and they are basically opaque, obscure, what have you. And and I agree with you, as long as there are more and more games that sort of break up this notion that it's all about moving wooden pieces and trading one card against another and getting excited that it says 2 instead of green 4. If the more games we have that are past this, that are like rambunctious, that are loud, or they're really clever, or they really make you think in ways that you didn't think about things before. The more games like this we have, the more these kind of games become part of the face of board games, the more we are sort of taking away from this unflattering impression people have of board games.
I mean, the thing is games, and this is why you see study after study and people retweet them saying games could cure fucking Alzheimer's and things, right? Is because, I mean, what you're doing, what games do, and we forget that this is, because we live in a society, especially, I mean, not so much in Germany, but certainly in the Anglo-Saxon countries where you can literally be fired at any fucking moment, right? So you have to work all the hours God sends and stick your fucking wedge your nose so far up your boss's arse that you can fucking taste what he had for breakfast that day for fear of everything, the bottom just falling out of your entire life, right? That we see entertainment as wholly passive. We see it as, now I'll binge watch Netflix or I'll watch the footy and I'll have a couple of glasses of wine and I won't think. And our neural pathways become ossified, right? What games do is they reignite these neural pathways. And if you can make people understand that this is as valuable as running or CrossFit or going to the gym, it exercises different muscles in the body that you're neglecting. Yeah. Understandably neglecting because society is pushing you in those paths. Then people will understand. And people are naturally inclined to do it. From whatever background. People do crosswords. People play patience. You know, I remember my mother endlessly playing games of patience. But she never fucking won, but just endlessly doing it. Because what you're doing is you're refiring those neural pathways. And that's the beauty of it that we need to convey. And that's, you're right, standing outside, looking at people sitting around a table, you don't get that.
I think that's that's basically it. I think if you have sort of if you're sensitized, is that a word? Sensibilized, that's the word. I don't know. But if you're sensitive enough to pick up on these small changes, if you're in the zone, if you're in the hobby, if you can appreciate a heavy strategy game where you sit there and you think and you just love, like you said, the neurons firing. You don't care that the activity is very low energy, comes across as very dull, and you're dry and unengaging because you're sitting there and you're having the time of your life because you're really excited about these choices. You're really excited about what could happen, what does happen. You're excited about taking risks, about minimizing risks. It's all very engaging, but you need to be able to go basically through the looking glass to see this. You need to have this. You need to take these steps. You need to somehow transport yourself from where you are before to where these people are now, that they can see the joy buried within cardboard and chits.
And I guess that's the problem with the board game media as it stands. And I'm not big on sort of slagging off board game media. I think some people do good work, some people do terrible work. In the same within any media, right? But I
think we're quite on the low end of terrible, I think.
Right. But it's all quite internalized. It's all focused towards the group. And I think we, for instance, are focused towards the group. And I think that serves a purpose. But I think there needs to be those. And I guess Will Wheaton tried to some degree to broaden it out and speak to the non-people. You need both of those aspects. And
I think people in. I think what Tabletop does some very, very interesting things. I think it does some very, very worthwhile things.
Well, fundamentally what Tabletop does, what no other sort of board game media thus far has managed to really do is be professional. And
well, yeah, okay.
To put those professional production and content restrictions on something that amateurs simply don't feel compelled to do. Right?
Yeah, I mean, in many cases, it's a question of means. I think the only other web show I know of that also strives for high production values, I think Man vs. Meeple. I think both of them strive and often succeed in looking very slick. And I think Tabletop just has people from the entertainment industry involved, and there's this pinch of, it's just better cut. There's clever direction.
Well, there's a rigorousness that professionals demand that amateurs don't, right?
Yeah, I guess. I think I'm not going to I don't want to criticize what Man vs. Meeple do. I think they have great production values. I think they're basically definitely top tier as far as board game media that I'm aware of, at least, goes. But you can see sort of they're going for something different than what Tabletop does. Tabletop really wants an entertainment show that would be just as well served on TV than it is on YouTube. You can see where they're coming from. You can see their the ideas of where they're going, of what they want to put across. And I think when they put together an episode that works, it's really, really great. It's really exciting, and it made me buy at least one game, like a first season, I think.
But most of them are YouTube no-marks who are desperately trying to snatch their 2 minutes of fame, and they make you want to knife them in the throat.
Oh, that's mean.
Bloody true, though. All right then, Georgios. Well, I'm going to nip off now.
Okay.
Because I need the Toiletto.
I think...
That's top chat, that, isn't it? That's top chat, Georgios. I need to go to the toilet. Oh, Ben. Oh, thanks for listening to our podcast, by the way, with this insightful top chat. I'm talking about my bloody toilet habit. I'm going to go, Georgios.
We were talking about professionals, so I mean... I'm
just going to go...
Yeah, please.
I'm going to fucking put my face into some icy water and sort my shit out. You know what your mate could do with?
Which mate?
Biner cards.
Well, he's not my mate, but I don't know, maybe a better business plan?
No, he could do with a set of blank playing cards that he could weave his binary magic upon without having to wipe out pictures of kings and queens on it.
Oh, actually, he's using magic cards though. No, but I think you're thinking in the right direction. But I'm thinking he would be probably better served with both blank dice and stickers to put on them, because that sort of gives you more flexibility, or plastic stands for your miniatures, for your characters.
That's interesting that you come up with that, Georgios.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, that's interesting. I'll help Mr. Biner Cards.
Yeah.
But where would he get that kind of stuff from to help him prototype the games?
Yeah, prototype those games. If there were games, Spielberg. Did you know Spiel is German word for game? So
It is.
So I could tell him, Alter, für das Spiel Prototyp brauchst du Kram. If I could tell him that, the Spiel Prototyp, I don't know where he would find it.
Hang on, I'm just going to quickly go on the internet.
All right, translate Spiel and prototype.
Yeah.
Put into Google Translate. Yeah.
Yeah.
You type like you're born to do it.
I am. Carry on. What else should I put in?
First translate it into Spanish.
Okay, yeah, go on
Then
there.
finish.
That's El Spielotyp. Yeah, then finish.
Then finish.
Spieli.
Then Russian.
Spielskabulski.
And then back to English. What does it put out?
Spielpro.com.
Well done.
Good evening, sir. Take a comfortable seat, slide into a complimentary pair of slippers, and enjoy our hospitality. Welcome to the guild.
Oof.
Why are you saying oof? I was the one partying last week.
I'm glad you come back, Georgios.
Yeah, it was a great time back at the old guild.
Because you were quite appalled by the stentorian conservatism of this place.
I am. I bet actually they have topless night at the old guild now. They all run around topless.
I'm glad I didn't go, to be honest.
Why? It's fun.
I'm sitting here, Georgios, soaking in the guitar smoke.
The guitar smoke.
And the
Why would you burn guitars? It's just such a waste.
Because they don't believe in young people's music like Chuck Berry, may rest in peace, and Elvis Presley.
And that is why this is a bad guild. I like the old guild,
They're
honestly.
saying it's deeply corrupting of the youth, and quite frankly, Georgios, now I'm at the age I am, I'm beginning to agree with them.
See, we have halogen lights, we have neon lights, we have topless nights. Occasionally there are women there, which is weird, but fine. I like the old guild. The old guild is great. These are a bunch of pervs.
General St. John Ponsonby Postlethwaite, I was having a chat with yesterday.
Oh, yeah?
Over a smoky scotch that he bought me, 'cause it's really bloody expensive here.
I bet.
And he said to me, "You know the problem with today, young Benjamin?"
Your name's Benjamin?
No, I let him indulge that, He's an old man, he's going to be dead soon. I let him indulge it.
Why did they call you Bendover?
That's my full name, but I didn't want to say that. It smacks of a lifestyle that he wouldn't agree with.
Speaking of smacking, apparently they're selling baby oil at the old guild now. It's really good.
They sell baby oil here, actually.
Oh, that's weird.
Crossover.
Dun-dun-dun.
Anyway, he said to me, and it's a point maybe that I think, bears some thinking about, at least thinking about. He said, "The problem with today, young Benjamin, is that the fillies aren't as pliable as they once were.
Who's Phyllis?
I have no idea what he's talking about, but he said it in that voice, and that voice is quite bewitching.
Well, Gunther, he's now in the old guild. He had put on a strange voice as well. It was very funny.
Stop trying to just draw me back, Georgios. I get to sit here in a lovely leather armchair. I get to watch Janine sashay across shag pile carpets to the sound of Vivaldi. What could be better, Georgios?
Well, Tension and Release have indicated they might be opening editions again. I might join them.
Oh, join them. They're hacks anyway. Did I tell you the email they sent me?
No.
We no longer sync. You're right for the band. We're moving in another direction. Maybe more Mediterranean, they said to me. And I go, fuck you with your Mediterranean shit.
Well, I don't think Tension and Release is going to last as a name, actually.
Are they going to change their name, are they?
Yeah.
What are they going to change it to?
Costas and the Buzukis.
Actually, it's got a ring to it.
Yeah,
It smells of Retsina and feta cheese, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I could get behind. So why have they
A lot of people can get behind us, yeah.
Why have they... Sorry? What pronoun did you use then?
Us. Them.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I know you're a little bit self-obsessed, so you like to push yourself into everything. So
No, not everything, just all of it.
Because you know, Georgios, if I found out that Tension and Release had kicked me out...
Right.
in place of you...
Oh, they wouldn't do that.
You know I'd be heartbroken. If you joined Costas and the Bazookas, do you know how heartbroken I would be, Georgios?
Would you be just as heartbroken if you found out what Janine was up to last week?
What the fuck are you talking about, Georgios?
Oh, what about the guild questions?
Yeah, let's go on to the guild questions. So what was the guild question, Georgios?
The guild question was, and it's a good one as well, and it's top of the page, what game mechanics are beyond saving?
All right, well, tell us what Ivor Bolokov. He's a Russian aristocrat from the old Romanov days.
I'm only now getting the pun. Ivor as in ivory, right?
That's right. Fabergé eggs.
It's very clever.
I know.
So clever.
I'm sure that he's got a secret vault full of Fabergé eggs and Romanov diamonds. And I'm sure if we mention him enough on this section in the guild, Georgios, he'll send us a Fabergé egg.
You know, the problem is, since
they're tasty.
Since we're recording this, even your whispers get recorded, so he will hear it. So if you want to whisper, you have to actually turn off the recording and tell me in a normal voice.
The general was telling me, all of this modern equipment, it's all a big lie. You're actually just talking into a void. And I believe him.
Oh, that sounds very Nietzschean. Anyway, he says he feels roll and move is beyond redemption at this point, and then there's some kind of murder fantasy and a Coen Brothers reference.
But the point is, it's not right, is it? I mean,
it's not a good Coen Brothers reference. You're right. It's a good movie. But
it's a good movie.
Yeah,
John Turturro is particularly good in it.
He's creepy. But I liked him more. He was, interesting enough, I thought he was less creepy in Lebowski.
Yeah. Even though he was playing a pederast. So the point is, the roll and move isn't beyond redemption, is it? I mean, there are great examples of great roll and move games.
Well,
Formula D, for example.
Yeah, I think it's
Colosseum, for example.
I think the fascinating. I have to admit, I haven't played Colosseum. I've seen it and I've read about it, but I haven't played it myself.
Have you felt it?
I have, yes.
You felt its presence.
I've Stefaned it a lot. That was
very clever.
I know.
Very clever. You know, it's very unseemly to crack a joke and then bask in the reflected glory of the wit you've just extolled, George.
Well, you needed to you pointed a flashlight on it. You shouldn't have. You just should have.
A flashlight?
Yeah.
Right. Carry on.
Again, nasty references. Anyway, I think I'm going to agree to a fraction of a point he may or may not have made, in that there used to be games that consisted of nothing but this one mechanic.
Right.
And those, I agree, are beyond redemption. Those cannot be saved. Roll and move, like, I don't know, Talisman, doesn't work. It's
dreadful
bad.
Because you're leaving yourself open solely to the fucking vagaries of chance, and there's nothing you can do to control it. It's not a game, it's an exercise. I mean, you know, you go back to the sort of ancient Indian times. I don't know what it was. I don't know. I hear things, they go in this old brain.
What you're trying to say is ancient foreign times.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. And they were sort of...
Pre-Brexit.
Yeah, pre-Brexit. Mm-hmm. Those golden days.
The golden, halcyon days, yeah.
They were sort of, object lessons in how chance can rule your life, and they were sort of moral tales.
Can I just
what they weren't is games.
Can I just point out, I'm going to argue that games still are this. They are still moral tales. They're not paying attention.
Well, what they do is they a different conception of morality, that it's not just some overarching top-down thing under which you have no control. Now, you can control your morality, you can make decisions. This idea that there is some omnipotent being that controls not only what happens outside of you, but the actions that you do yourself seems very old-fashioned and very reductive. And what new games give us, if they are moral tales, is this idea that you can grasp what you wish and you can make decisions and you can go in directions. Contradicts neuroscience, but what the fuck do they know?
No, I think actually, yes, I think what you're saying is true, but beyond that, I also think that even games that I'm sort of reminded of was it Say Bye to the Villains, a Senji Kanai game that I really, really like and enjoy because it usually, I think occasionally there are perfect plays where the cards fall just right that before the final round starts, you know if you're going to win or not. You have perfect information, you know exactly you have every decision in your hands. But those instances are rare. Most of the time, you have to trust into fate. You have to trust that the card that will screw you over is not actually face down in front of you, or the card that you've drawn will be the one you need. It just, the way it sort of negotiates control and helplessness, random chance, I think is fascinating because I've played this game with people who love Eurogames because of the things you described. Control, being in control of your own fate, being responsible for your victory or failure. It was really just like watching somebody get a splash of cold water over their head and just all of a sudden go, wait, I need to rethink this.
Right.
And this game specifically, just sort of, that's how I went to this idea of morality, to this idea of, yes, a certain amount is out of your control. We like to believe in this myth that we're self-made men or women, that we control our fate, and it's our decisions that decide whether, decisions that make or break our future and our fates or whatever. And it's just not true. I'm not saying we are completely helpless, but it's just not binary. It's not,
Absolutely. We're not a feather for each wind that blows in the same way that we're not completely in control, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a combination of both.
And I like these games that are sort of, certain games sort of sell you this fantasy of being completely in control. And it's a nice fantasy. It's one I like to indulge in as well occasionally. But I also like the fact that, and one of the reasons why I love Dungeon Quest so much is because it utterly refuses to play by these rules. It utterly refuses to give you anything but the tiniest bit of control.
But it plays by a very strict rule.
Yeah.
You cannot live with that sort of lack of control over a certain amount of time.
Maybe.
That game played over 3 hours is a fucking nightmare. That game played over 25 minutes is bloody hilarious.
Sure, but I mean, generally speaking, it teaches you how to handle these situations. Because even these games that you fully control, they're over at some point. Yeah, I think, going back to my original point, this morality layer, I think it's still there. I think it's probably might actually be worth an entire series in itself, just looking at board games and what kind of, not values, but what kind of challenges, situations, and ethical, maybe moral, I don't know, I'm grasping for words here, what kind of quasi-philosophical ideas they support by way of weighing chance, control, and influence, and how you interact with others.
I think what's interesting is a lot of people may reject this, and they may say, oh, you're just being pretentious, but the fact is, I think...
pretentious is just a nasty word for ambitious.
Right, and I think, everything is infused with this because it's created by people, and we're a product of our environments, and everything we create is infused with the things we've been infused with as we grow, and so
values, our beliefs,
and inherently something's moral, and you could say, oh well, it's just a connection of mechanics, but the way you put those mechanics together says something about the way you view the world and what you view to be good and what you view to be bad.
Exactly.
Right?
When you include rules and limitations to incentivize certain behavior, because you think this behavior is either, not only is it fun, but you want to support this behavior. You want people, like for example, in certain games, you want people to be at each other's throats. At other games, you want people to sort of find ways to coordinate, to communicate. And it's all just an expression of what kind of experience you want people to have for a certain amount of time.
And if you want to say there's no politics in gaming and blah, 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 look at Ponzi Scheme, for instance. I played Ponzi Scheme recently, and this is a game all about highlighting to you how rapacious capitalism is, and it's baked into the game.
Right.
And you get to play the person doing the nasty stuff, and you come away thinking the predominant thought is, thank God. That's not really how it all runs.
Oh, no. It's all very fair and all based on meritocracy.
Or thank God, at least I don't.
Yes.
I'm not that rapacious kind of person myself.
No, I'm not actually taking advantage of any privilege I have. No, not at all.
All right, let's go on to Pedro Mendoza. Mucho Musica is his name.
That's a nice name.
I wonder what kind of music it is.
Lots of it?
It's lots of... I assume mucho means a lot of.
Yeah.
In a language. Spanish, I would assume.
Yeah, possibly.
And what does he say?
He
Mucho
says,
Musica.
He doesn't say much of it. Anyway.
Well, because it's not music, it's the written form, George. If it was music, it would just be pages and pages. But because it's the spoken written form...
The spoken written.
The spitten. Yes.
The spitten.
That's what I like to call it.
Any kind of take that action/card/ability that screws a player's ability to play the game proper, that also happens to give the offender no meaningful advantage whatsoever.
A quick thing, to our American listeners, there are such things as adverbs, right? So ly exists at the end of words. Just saying. So, Georgios, what do you think? We spoke about this, right? How take that can be so de-incentivizing when it just destroys something that you've built.
Oh yeah, I think this is a frustration I felt as well, especially if it doesn't help you in any way. I think the game I remember that really put me off take that mechanism for a while was Eminent Domain, which isn't explicitly take that, but it is pretty zero-sum, which boils down to the same thing.
Right.
I didn't like it in Eminent Domain because I felt constrained to destroy other people's progress.
But what Pedro says here is that also happens to give the offender no meaningful advantage whatsoever. That I find particularly egregious. Just watching the world burn, right?
Actually, yeah. I respect that. I respect games that explicitly give you the option, look, this is a knife, you can use it. If you want to, there's nothing to be gained from it. What kind of person are you?
You see, but the problem is, that's really nice as a principle, the way you lay that out. But there's an incentive, even if you don't get points or anything, to use the knife.
If only we're in control of our actions, right?
And the thing is, it's not a fair arbiter of whether a person's moral or not. It's just saying, look at this lovely knife. Use me. I'm a lovely knife. And all that does is breed resentment and frustration. I hate...
Oh yeah, no, I agree. But then this is something that maybe, you should think about when you pick up the knife. The metaphorical knife in this case.
Yeah, but the game offers you false constrictions under which using the knife is perfectly fine. Apart from you're going to screw someone else. And the point is, even if it doesn't give the offender any benefit, it doesn't give the offender any punishment either, and that I have an issue with. It's not a moral thing. This isn't a broader thing about the state of society. It's just, if I've spent 3/4 of a game building something, and I'm really enjoying that sort of assembly of an engine that's going to do something for me, if someone just comes and wantonly, like a kid on a beach kicking a sandcastle over, destroy what I'm doing, just because the opportunity is available to do it, that makes me feel completely disillusioned. I think he has a point there.
I think you're right. I think this is a result of what happens, and I think the next step should be maybe figuring out why that person set out to destroy your progress.
Because the game lets you do it. It's not.
But now you're abdicating. Aren't you abdicating responsibility by saying, "But the game allows me, therefore I'm free of responsibility"? That's not true. You're still the person picking up, kicking sandcastles. You're still the person
regardless,
destroying things.
because the game exists in a context in which these things are without repercussion. Mm-hmm. And I mean, personally,
well, they are. The repercussions are obviously you just spelled them out. The repercussions are somebody at the table is going to be pissed off and frustrated and resentful. This is an actual real-life repercussion. It's not points. It's not meeples. It's a real-life repercussion. And the fact that people don't consider them should be alarming.
We're all supposed to be adults and not find that annoying, right? And I think...
I disagree with that.
Because the thing is, the thing I like about games is there's an aspect of escapism for me. And I like the fact that I just like games in which I'm allowed to do my shit. Mm-hmm. And I find it frustrating if that is then destroyed for no good reason. And I think it's, if not bad game design, malicious game design, and I don't feel that works for me, I suppose is the best way to describe it.
No, I can see the frustration, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't be frustrated. I wouldn't go experience the same things, but I think I'm not willing to blame the rule for people's behavior.
Oh no, I think if the rule is there, it's like the shotgun. It's like the shotgun in the Hemingway story. It's going to go off by the end of the story, right? The author is specifically prescribing some behavior, and someone's going to do it at some point. Anyway, let's move on. You're going to help me pronounce this, Georgios, because this is in your wheelhouse.
Well, repeat after me. I, Ben.
It sounds very similar to my name.
Yeah.
This.
I, Ben, have a small penis.
Is that a real Greek name?
It is a Greek name.
Can you repeat? I'll.
Ivan. Have a small penis.
Have a small penis.
Yes, very good.
Do you know what? That sounds very similar to Ben.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have a small penis.
Never noticed that.
Isn't it amazing how sort of,
different languages,
one
right?
thing in one language means something, and in another language, the same sound.
Yeah.
But it means completely something
it's
different.
Fascinating.
I mean, how would his name translate then? Ben, have a small penis. How would that translate into English?
Roughly, Panayotis.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Isn't that a type of Italian dessert?
No.
That you like a jelly pudding thing?
No. But I think I know.
All right. So what does Ben have a small penis say then?
He says, for me, any board or card game that involves extended combat, especially those that rely on the interminable back and forth chipping away of hit points or some such surrogate. And he's perfectly correct in that, yeah?
Combat's dull often in games, isn't it? It's just, I feel like we have to have it in there, so we bolt it on, and it's this separate meta game that takes bloody hours. And the problem is often with combat, if it's a two-player game, this is not an issue because everyone's involved. But in a multiplayer game, it's often between a minority of players at the table, and you have to sit there and wait 20 minutes while they resolve their crap and da-da-da-da-da. Okay, can we carry on now? Good.
I think the biggest draw with these kind of, I think the point where I'm agreeing with him is that combat that is repetitive, that isn't dynamic, that doesn't change rapidly from one move to the next is dull, because it's just the same thing over and over and over and over again. And it only allows one or at most two possible outcomes. Combat, even extended combat, becomes far more interesting if it allows for a lot of different outcomes.
Right.
And if it is dynamic and changing, and it's not always just the same action over and over and over again.
Or combat that is very simple, very streamlined, very quick, but the output and the ramifications of that combat goes on into the game.
Yeah.
The example I would use is Scythe. I love the combat system in Scythe. Because,
I preferred it in Rex.
Yeah, well, okay, fair enough. But, it's that thing of it doesn't take very long. The decisions you have to make aren't very deep and taxing. But what happens afterwards has an impact on what happens in the rest of the game.
Oh, yeah.
And that interests me because I'm not interested in the endless dice rolling combat sort of stuff. It's just not where I jive, and so I think Scythe really makes a virtue of making the combat just another short action.
Yeah.
That's a part of the game. I played Euphoria for the first time. This is a bit of a tangent, but I played Euphoria for the first time the other day. And what I think Jamie Stegmaier has a focus on, whether he recognises this or whether it's just a natural design thing that he does, is he really wants people's turns to be short. Lots and lots of short turns.
Right.
And that's really satisfying because you finish your turn and then it goes back again. You do your turn.
Generally, I agree, but I felt with Sad specifically, that short turn came at the cost of these decisions having very small impacts. I never felt that if I made a decision on my turn, it changed a lot. It was incremental change over time. Eventually it built up to something that felt satisfying, but my individual turns felt there were short, which was great, but the payoff was sort of meh. I wanted more things to happen.
I understand that, but I mean the thing is, I'm not going to get into a review of Scythe, and I'm not going to change your mind, but I really enjoyed that aspect of From Little Acorns, Mighty Oaks Grow.
Right, yeah.
I enjoy that, and I'm very impatient, and I'm someone who takes turns very quickly. I mean, it might be why I don't win very often, but I like the momentum of a game. I like it to clip along. I don't like it to stop and halt and be this thing where my tension and my concentration is always being asked to pause while someone else goes through something.
Yeah.
I think Jamie Stegmaier's designs really facilitate that game trotting along nicely.
That's interesting, because my experience was entirely different. But yeah, I think that's why we arrived at the conclusions we did on a Scythe review, which
you can hear on one of the episodes.
Yeah, look up our geek list I've put together for all episode. There's a Scythe review on it.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, isn't it? It's I think the reason people find these kind of combat mechanics bulky and unwieldy and dull is actually probably because it's just bad design, or if not bad design, bolted on in an unnecessary manner, and we have something in our hind brains that picks up on something that shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of combat mechanisms suffer from this lack of focus, or rather they don't always transport well what you as a player are where your fun in this combat is supposed to come from. Combat mechanics that work, I feel that sort of even if they're a bit longer, they tell you what's fun about this moment, where you get your enjoyment from, or what the tense decision is, and where the excitement is coming from. And combat mechanics that are just, in there because they need to be in there, but they aren't really polished yet. Sort of, they feel clunky, they feel unwieldy, they feel out of place. I mentioned Rex earlier, and one of the reasons why I really love the Rex mechanic, because it's very similar to Scythe, is the one thing that Scythe is sadly missing. It's the unexpected reveal of the leaders. They can sort of, they change things, they can sort of be, you can have them as an agent, as a spy, so to flip things over again, and this tension, you know exactly what your biggest weakness is, and you're under this pressure and you don't know, you're starting getting into these mind games, and I love that. I think the combat mechanics in Rex are great for me. I enjoy them a lot because the focus is clear to me. I know where my fun is coming from, I know where the excitement, the tension is coming from, and I know how and when it will resolve, and it's exciting to see when it does.
All right then, Georgios. Well, what do you think of the place now? You've had another evening?
It should be burnt down.
What's wrong with you? These are lovely people.
Well, they're not.
He fought in the Second World War.
On which side?
I don't know. I didn't want to broach the subject for fear of, but I mean, he over there.
Yes.
He's a prominent Parliament member from one of the prominent parties.
Which side?
I haven't broached the subject yet. I'm not comfortable with it. And look at the beautiful aroma of the place. It smells like Vicks Vapor Rub, Vaseline, Werther's Originals, and the smell of Cuba.
Like I said, burn the whole place down.
Say goodnight, Georgios.
Give me some matches.
Some bloke stole my bike once, Georgios.
Is that a Punch-Out reference?
And I wanted to find him, and I wanted to take his legs and chop them off with a bolt cutter that he cut my bike chain with. Do you know how I was feeling, Georgios?
You know we're doing an advert right now.
Yes, I was trying to explain that I was feeling vengeful, Georgios. It was a poor, bloody way to talk about vengefulgames.dk, and now you've ruined it.
I'm quite certain that's not how you pronounce it. It's Danish after all. It's Vengeful Games.
A Vengeful Games is a .dk. So Vengeful Games is...
I apologise, by the way. I have no idea how to do a Danish accent. Or a Danish.
I was there. It's exactly like that.
Excellent.
So Vengeful Games is a internet retailer hailing from Denmark, but who has incredibly low prices. And he literally has all the games on the market. Literally. And I'm using literally in
the correct word.
In the correct
meaning
way.
Very emphatically.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can go on to vengefulgames.dk, and he's just opened up his shipping to the EU. So now he ships to Austria, Belgium, Germany, France, Finland, Netherlands, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. So if you want...
At least for a couple of months.
Exactly. So if you want great games that are cheap, you want to get on Vengeful Games. Give us a game that they've got.
They have Ponzi Scheme, which is about Ponzi, which apparently I believe is the Danish version of Happy Days.
That's
They
right.
have this character called Ponzi.
And he punches the jukebox.
No, I think he punches the band.
And it comes out with trolls.
No, I think those are the Swedes.
And also, you can pre-order games on vengefulgames.com. And here,
DK.
vengefulgames.dk, excuse me. And you can pre-order the hottest game of this year.
Settlers of Catan.
Charterstone.
Oh, all right,
from Jamie Stegmaier, his new Euro-style legacy game, which, if I know anything about Jamie Stegmaier, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. So go to vengefulgames.dk.
Well done.
It's cheap, it's efficient, and Thomas, he loves the games, so he gets the good ones.
This is the Board Game Professor. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It feels like so long since we were last here together. I miss you. I see you're letting your beard grow out. It looks nice. Work is fine for me. Thank you for asking. It really is good to see you. Today I'm really excited to dig into a topic that has come up on the show many times, and elsewhere in the hobby as well, and really dig in deep with some social theory to see if we can't get to a more nuanced conversation. I want to talk about Alexander Pfister's Kinderspiel Special Mention and what should have been Kinderspiel nominated Mombasa. Yeah, I'm still carrying around that Kinderspiel grudge. You gotta be kidding me with time stories. Since its release, Mombasa has drawn a considerable amount of attention in the board gaming hobby for two reasons. The first is that it is excellent game design. I'll talk a little about the actual design of the game because I want to see it fairly represented, but for our purposes today it's not essential to know every mechanic and card symbol to have a greater conversation about its place in our hobby. The second reason it comes up as often as it does is because of its choice of theme to implement its mechanical system, in which players assume the role of investors in chartered companies spreading their holdings across the continent of Africa in order to make the most money and win the game. This choice of theme isn't uncomplicated, obviously, given the human history occurring at the time of the game's setting, which isn't actually represented in the game. For instance, the Belgians distinguishing the Hutus and Tutsis apart by nose size, forcing them to carry identity cards, and setting the stage for a horrific ethnic genocide. We call that colonial administration. The game Pfister designed, of course, isn't about ethnic cleansing in the explicit, but that doesn't mean it isn't about colonial administration in the implicit. I'll come back to that in a moment. For now, let's say if you're familiar with this conversation around this game to its current point, it seems we have split into two camps. Team, it's just a game, relax already you bleeding heart snowflakes, and team, this game is an offensive, insensitive travesty and belongs only in the rubbish heap. I want to talk about the game today because I'm torn. I have my critiques and will offer them, and I hope they're new for the dialogue already in place. But I also think it's one of the most impressive games I've ever played mechanically speaking. And I think the conclusions I'll reach seek something a little more complex than either of those two rather absolutist interpretations we have so far. I said I think they'll be, because I haven't gotten to them yet. We'll see how it goes. First, let's talk about the game. A game of Mombasa lasts 7 rounds, and primarily it's an area control stock investment game with one of the most dynamite action selection mechanics to strategize around that you'll see in a board game, I think anyway. At the beginning of each of the 7 rounds, players place 3 action cards under their player board that will determine what actions are available to them in that round, and up to 5 cards if they've unlocked those extra slots. Those action cards allow them to do things like purchase new cards from the display on the main board into their hand, expand the trading posts of any of the 4 companies on the board by taking them from the company's base and settling a territory adjacent to any previously settled territory, or move up either of the player's personal tracks for greater rewards. Spreading the trading posts across the map of the African continent serves several purposes. Initially, when the trading post is placed, the player gains a bonus of money, or moving up those player tracks, or moving up the stock track of whatever company is being expanded. And moving up the stock tracks is vitally important because it increases the total shares a player has in that company, and the more trading posts taken out of the company base will increase the value of those shares. At the end of the game, the player will earn money based on the number of shares they own in each company multiplied by each company's total value, and because the money earned will be one of the central points generators for the game, this area control contest is a central focus of the game. There are other ways to succeed in the game. The 2 player tracks, diamonds and bookkeeping, offer big points if no one else is worrying about them, and you can win doing almost that alone. And there are all sorts of other things happening and actions to take, and I haven't even scratched the surface of. But the area expansion control aspect of Mombasa is what I focus on for today's critique. Let me offer some praise first, because recently my internet friend and guy who just demolished me at Through the Ages Online, John Gets Games, found out for all of us, if you talk sideways about the Great Fist these days, even rightfully so, the nerds will rage against you. So here goes. The action selection mechanism, as I said, is so cool. When you place cards in the action slots, you activate them in various ways until you can't take any more actions in the round and have to pass. But when that round is complete, you move those actions to the top of the player board in the exact same slots they're already in, creating piles of spent cards called resting decks. At the moment of passing, the player picks up one of these resting decks to return them to her hand to be used in future rounds. What this creates is a tough, crunchy planning process completely devoid of theme and entirely about generating moments of heavy strategy. It is everything I love about board gaming. Also, the area control contest is enjoyable given that each player can contribute to the expansion of any of the companies. It's even possible to benefit from boosting stocks in a company while letting another player do the dirty work of expanding their territory. I know because I did that in one game and won by a mile and everyone hated me and it was fantastic. Okay, you hear that, jerks? I talked nice. Now let's talk not so nice. When I think about the troublesome theme of Mombasa, and Pfister's acknowledgement in the preface of the instructions that it is a dark moment in human affairs, he even offers a citation for Christ's sake, I think of the field of anthropology and its crisis of colonial ethnography. For the sake of offering my own citation, Diane Lewis wrote a useful article in 1973 called Anthropology and Colonialism, in which she tracks the dilemma faced by anthropologists doing field work in colonized populations and the conversation they were having about the responsibility of the researcher, which was almost always Western and almost always white. At this point in the history of the discipline, Claude Levi-Strauss and Irving Goffman and Albert Memmi and a bunch of other stodgies realized, oh holy crap, maybe we're doing as much harm as good here in our research. Levi-Strauss, not the blue jeans guy, sparked the interaction with a basic admission. Our century, an era of violence in ominous scare quotes, left some peoples in power and other peoples and civilizations in subordinate positions in the global cultural hierarchy. And whether or not they wanted it to be true, this was the social reality in which the field of research existed. Here's one of the most important distinctions he made right up front. Most anthropologists would have otherwise abhorred the idea of colonial or racial violence. We're talking about a bunch of Oxford and Ivy League trained intellectuals here. But in the early 70s, they tried to acknowledge having no ill intentions in your research doesn't mean it won't generate unintentionally ill results. In fact, most studies of colonized populations, while purporting to understand them, were extending a lot of pretty damaging colonialist assumptions. Let's talk about why. Essentially, as the critique went, anthropological studies of colonized populations were executed making a few essential assumptions, all of which came as a result of the very act of colonization. For instance, to colonize requires a detachment from the colonized on the part of the colonizer. It was easier to subjugate an entire culture if you imagine them as a resource, not a person, perhaps not even human at all. Similarly, an anthropologist in declaring a population to which he does not belong as an artifact of research requires a similar detachment. It allows a consumption of the culture in question as an object of scientific production, not a people with complexity, humanity, and emotion. And equally important, any information produced as a result of interacting with this population that has been subordinated in the very act of studying them exists to the benefit of the Western researcher at some university across the globe as he seeks accolade and notoriety, and if he's lucky and doesn't jump off of a bridge first, tenure. It never acts to the direct benefit of the colonized population itself, even though they were essential to the creation of the study. Diane Lewis even questioned the very idea of scientific objectivity on the part of the researcher. To question objectivity had less to do with an epistemological exploration of the nature of truth and knowledge as it did with an observation of what happens in those moments of objective detachment. The process is rather simple. To remain objective is to detach from the people studied entirely. To detach is to establish an implicit dichotomy of superordinate and subordinate. In other words, to claim objectivity is to other, to turn human subjects into objects. Here's a quote from Lewis that will help us. Objectification through depersonalization devalues the individual. The individual, preoccupied with problems the observer refuses to acknowledge, is ignored. Similarly, the anthropologist, in his concern with patterns, ethos, and structures, is several levels of abstraction removed from the raw data, end quote. Let's make some use out of that idea and go back to talking board games, and interrogate the reasons why "it's just a game" isn't really good enough, certainly not a conversation ender. Alex Pfister chose as a theme for Mombasa, African colonialization. That is a process that stands outside other sensitive and tragic subject matters for game design like, say, warfare, because it involves the perpetual instantiation of global racial hierarchy and the subjugation of one people by another. I genuinely don't believe, nor should you, that Pfister sat down to make a game and thought to himself, let's get to oppressing some natives. That's my German accent, by the way. In fact, he went out of his way to say it wasn't his intention at all and just wanted to make a great game and fit it into a sensible theme. But really, he leaves himself open in that moment to the same critique that anthropologists were making of their own discipline 40 years ago. We could claim, I think, that any board game that uses historical settings or cultural interactions are making some version of a historical and anthropological statement. Those statements and the tools and assumptions used to make them are available for criticism, despite the intention of the designer and the quality of the finished product. I mean, have you played Puerto Rico? It's perfect, but we're going to have to come back to it on another episode because holy shit. When Lewis argued scholars use abstraction to remove themselves several steps from the subject matter and offer objective evidence, and the objectivity of that abstraction creates a bifurcation between the scholars and those they study, we must think about how this happens in the process of gaming and game design. To use a colonized population, specifically in their moment of colonization, as a theme for a game which is always an abstraction, isn't to desire or celebrate their colonization, but consume their colonization for our mutual Western benefit as outsiders to their loss. Alex won awards for this game. We all sit around playing it in a shop or a pub or cafe or in our living rooms. So many steps removed geographically and temporally from what's actually happening in the game. And to leave what we all know is happening completely out of the story for the sake of just creating a good game is to extend the process of their colonization through our willingness to keep them as an object of consumption. In that way, it isn't just a game. A social theorist would remind us that these processes are happening whether we want them to or not, whether we claim to be participating in them or not, whether we even think they are real or not. So what do we do about it? Should we toss Mombasa in the bin? I don't think so. It's a terrific game design, as I continue to say. But we as a community have an opportunity to deepen our conversations about the themes of our games and the observations those themes allow us to make about what a leisure hobby in a mostly Western setting can do to engage broader global responsibilities. In her article, Lewis mentioned that anthropologists could center the populations they study with complexity and understanding in ways that seek to engage and alleviate their oppression. Perhaps we can think about how games might do that. Mombasa absolutely does not, and I think a critique of it in that vein is a sound and useful one. But can board games do that at all? I don't know. I don't really have the time left to postulate. But certainly I think we can go as far here as to say a simple dismissal of games as just being games simply isn't good enough. We can enjoy our games and look at them with a sharper eye. Let's do that, because I think we just might learn a few things about why this world we're living in looks the way it does, yes? I'm Nick Mariner, on Twitter at TheGoodMariner, and my board game blog is iCallYellow at iCallYellow.com. Thanks for listening.
It's crass, unsophisticated, and emotionally manipulative.
It's this week's review.
Alright, you maggots, listen up. At 0400 hours, we're breaching reality. Allow manifestations of metaphysical concepts to enter our plane of existence and pollute the general populace.
What does that mean?
What that means, Johnson, is that your mama was right. Christian sin is real and given physical form. We are as surprised as anybody else at this news. Most of all our vicar. Luckily, our scientists have found their only weakness. Bullets. and copious amounts of violence. Your job is to go out there and kick their asses back to whatever hell they came from. You can shoot them, you can punch them, you can pummel them with each and every one of your limbs. It should come easy as they are ugly, grotesque, and deformed bastards. Now, sin will try to seduce you, corrupt you with promises of power, and then slowly corrode your soul until you're nothing but a rabid animal out to harm and destroy every living thing around you. This has been codenamed going full conservative. Don't. You have to resist. Work with your teammates and your weapons and shoot to kill. Rescue innocent bystanders if you happen on them. I don't expect all of you to come back. Or most of you even. Seems to be Sin's goal to decimate as much of this team as it can. Which means now is as good a time to tell you this as ever. I agree with the writings of Judith Butler. Now go out there and kill me a great big number of the others.
Yeah, skip to the end.
It's the one-sentence review.
The Other's 7 Sins, in its sheer production, reflects the greed, avarice and lust that Simon engenders in its customers. On top of that, it is a sprawling, torrid combat game that just manages to pull off what it intends. Just.
The Others is loud, goofy, a bit trashy and dumb, but it can allow itself to be that way because the rules are robust and dependable without grinding play into a slow crawl.
Georgios? Ooh, what's that in the corner of the room?
I don't know, but it's eating peanuts with its nose.
Alright, Georgios, so it seems to me...
So it does.
The betentacled elephant that comes dripping of sputum and smelling like sin is asking me, is this just another one of those one versus many games that there seems to be a plethora of? Or does this offer something different to the genre? Is there a reason to spend the kind of money that Simon asks for a game like this?
Yes, the genre has seen a sort of resurgence as of late, not at least in part due to Kickstarter
But certainly due in part to the success of Descent as well, I would suggest.
Sure, yeah, but I mean, these type of games used to be reserved for big companies who could put in the capital to produce that many miniatures, that much stuff to put on your table. And with Kickstarter specifically, Simon is very, very famous for its use of Kickstarter. These games have sort of sprung up more often because miniatures attract backers and backers bring enough money to put these games into shelves. I think a while back we reviewed another vaguely related type game, Perdition's Mouth. Not one versus many, but, group versus game. But the idea is essentially same. It's a dungeon crawl type game. And I would generally classify the Others as well as a dungeon crawl type game. And I think it is, to a certain extent, just another one of those games. It is a certain take on the genre. It has there's a certain uniqueness to it. It's not interchangeable, but it doesn't transcend its genre. It doesn't do something radically different. It just tweaks it a bit and makes it entertaining. Yeah, I mean, if you're invested in this type of genre, I think you can appreciate the differences of this game to any of the other one versus many games that are out there. If you just like one or two of those games in your collection and you already have them, I'm not quite certain the Others is unique enough to stand out, but it's one of a type. Yeah.
It does a couple of things differently than a lot of these one versus many games don't, in that there's not a lot of leveling up. There's not a lot of campaigning, really.
I think there is a leveling up, isn't it?
You can buy equipment. I mean, that's pretty much...
Well, the sin mechanic is leveling up, isn't it?
Well, it's not like... So what a lot of these games aim to do is ape the RPG experience.
Oh, yeah.
What I mean by leveling up is you finish your combat, you finish this scenario, and then you get to go here and do this, and these abilities improve. That's sort of baked into as you're playing the game. It's dynamic, right?
Yeah.
And also, there's none of this love of your character because you know that they're all very dispensable and they can die at any time and very, very quickly. And that makes you more of a general as you play than as a soldier, right? So it's more about mobilizing a team as it is to controlling your character within the context of other people in a squadron.
I think it's quite... Now is a good time to point out, we've played this game separately. We haven't played games together. I've only played as the Sin, and I understand you only have played as one of the not people things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, we do approach the game and the review slightly differently because I have no doubt that this is exactly as you say. I just haven't played it myself. What I have played as a Sin, what I did see was that unlike most other one versus many dungeon crawler type games I've played, this instills a certain bloodlust in you as the Sin player because the killing of these characters is your victory condition.
Well, there's absolutely no question in this. I played a campaign of Descent, and the guy who was playing the Overlord, I mean, and you're not compelled to do it this way, but he felt more of a DM role.
Right.
In certain things, guiding the story as much as being an opponent. There's none of that in this.
Yeah.
The Sin player is out there to be as brutal and as bloody as possible.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Interesting enough, I have actually one proper dungeon crawl type game in my collection. It's the original Doom, the board game. I do remember when I compare my experiences with Doom with the others, is that Doom occasionally you had to slip into the situation of I could sort of play perfectly, but that's just it's more likely to end up in a beatdown of the players than an enjoyable experience. And with the others, this doesn't happen. You do, interestingly enough, have a sort of swing happening as the game progresses. Let's wind back to the elephant of the topic and talk in depth about the experience later. I agree with you that it is condensed. There's no leveling up. There's no campaign structure to this, not at least one that feels worthy of the name. And that does set it apart from other games of the type. But overall, I think the experience is comparable enough that if you really love this type of game, then I think it's unique enough to own it. If you just generally like some type of this game in your collection, this is a good example. Any of the others work as well if the theme appeals to you or if one of the mechanics sounds fun.
And this isn't a hybrid. That's one thing I would say. It's not a Eurotrash game. It's not like other Eric Lang games like Blood Rage, like Chaos in the Old World, which you see this sort of melding of Ameritrash and Euromechanics. This is a balls-to-the-wall Ameritrash game with a lot of dice rolling, with a lot of tactical planning.
Yeah.
And I played it with a guy who's a dyed-in-the-wool Eurogame player, and he had a real issue because there's a lot of edge cases and specific little rules, and he really didn't take to it. And so if you're not into those games, this ain't the game for you. But in terms of it being a unique one versus many, I think it has aspects, and I'll go into this later.
So, what did you think of my interactive, candid photo montage?
Well, it was certainly an experience.
Well, this, you see, is unique in that me and Georgios have played both sides, but we've never swapped. So I can only talk about my experience as part of the squad, and Georgios can only talk of his experience as being super evil.
Also playing
in the game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's okay.
And so what I find about this game is it's hard. You're up against it the whole time. It's never easy. I never felt we had the game's soul. But there is one idea that is in this game that is a promoter of tension. Because in other one versus many games, what you have is you have your turn and then either the Overlord goes or everyone has their turn, then the Overlord goes, and there's a promenade. You know what's coming when. The others has this one mechanic where the Overlord can choose to react to a player's turn or not. And when they react, they have to react against that player that has just gone. So you might go through a whole game actually getting off scot-free. It's not likely, but so there's always that overhanging tension that if I do this action, is the Overlord then going to choose to pick on me. And you don't know when they're going to come in, and you don't know whether they're just going to save up all their turns to the end and then run through you. And that's really interesting as a player, because you have to then plan for all of those eventualities, right?
That's really interesting, because as a sim player, my thought process went into a different direction. I could sort of plot ahead, see, right, they are going to do something like this. He's going to attack. He's going to equip, because table talk allows you to sort of look into the minds of the players. So what I ended up doing is looking at my hand of cards, my hand of special events, and figuring out a nice combo and when to spring it on players. So basically I was planning ahead 2-3 actions in a row or at a time, realizing, right, I know no matter what that player does, I'm not going to interrupt him because I don't have any cards that actually work. But I do know I have this one card. So you end up having this bird's eye view of turn structure, and you basically jump in when you see an opportunity. And it's interesting to hear you say that you do not know when that opportunity arises, because you do not see the hand of the of the sim player. So this asymmetric look at the game state does provide, as I can now sort of confirm, does lead to an interesting experience on both sides of the table.
You know, there's the spirit of the game, to play the game in the spirit in which it was intended, right?
Right.
And I've never played a game, I don't think, where I've wanted to say to the other players on my team, look, let's fuck off into another room and discuss this and then come back so this dickhead can't hear what we're saying. But that's not the spirit of the game. Part of that is being able to discuss this and getting a plan that's so cast iron that it doesn't matter that he can hear everything you're saying. You're going to be unbeatable. And that's really enjoyable. But never have I wanted to know sign language more in my life, right? So I could just sit there, sign to other people. They could sign back, and then we'd go, okay, we're going to do our turn now. Because it really promotes that. Because you don't know when they're going to act.
Yeah. And this sort
you
of...
don't know when your decision-making is gonna be fucked with, and that's really, really interesting.
It is interesting. This dynamic turn order really sort of infuses these turns with life, because without it, you would have a very, very basic, I do my action, you do your action, the sim player reacts. I do my action, you do your action, sim player reacts. And that is, well, dull, kind of.
I mean, it can be fun. I love Descent, for instance. I really enjoy Descent, but it leads to an element of min-maxing to some degree, because you can plot out and know kind of what's going to happen. Right?
But I think the clever thing about this is that the dynamism sort of meshes well with the fact that what you can do on your turn isn't a lot. You can move, you can shoot, you can activate a building once a round. I don't know how to, well, once a turn, whatever. And that's it. You have a very limited choice of actions available to you. You don't have any special extra action that only you can do and stuff like that. These are all, the special abilities are minor. You have 3 major actions. But because of this dynamism, because of this non-static turn order, it becomes an interesting and easily graspable back and forth between the two parties. And that makes it engaging, fun, and as you just described it, tense. As a sim player, it becomes this very strategic, tactical decision making. Because again, the only thing you're interested in is moving people and killing them, and maybe arranging it so what your one card gets triggered so you get some sort of bonus. That's interesting because it's a surprisingly small and simple rule set that allows for fun decision making. And that's really a strength that shouldn't be underestimated.
I mean, I did find part of my experience was going back and forth to the rule book.
Right.
Because there are fiddly exceptions and line of sight rules and all of that sort of stuff that's inherent to sort of combat games.
Oh, but line of sight at least I think was fairly easy though.
I'm using that as an example. There's a number of reasons that I would go back to the rulebook, because I would get questions all the time. And if I move here, can this happen? And all of these sorts of things. And this is a game in which a lot of these Ameritrash games, once you're up and running, they're really good fun. Mm-hmm. But they're difficult to get up and running. There is a certain element of back and forth and rules referencing and stuff that I'm, as someone who primarily plays games that maybe up front have a number of rules that need to be explained once the engine's chugging along.
Right.
You don't really need, because it's intuitive. These Ameritrashy games are less intuitive, I think, than a lot of Euro games are. And that I found frustrating until I knew what I was doing, and after I knew what I was doing. I mean, especially, the guy I was playing with is dyed in the wool Euro game, a really lovely guy, but when you've got someone sitting next to you going, every 2 minutes. I mean, that's going to diminish the experience, right? And part of that was because of the fiddliness at times.
Well, our experience with my group was a bit, I think, more easygoing. We did look up the rulebook once or twice, but for the most part, that was fairly straightforward to us. I think maybe
you're just cleverer than I am, so you know what I mean?
I didn't explain the rules. I had them explained to me, so whoever explained them actually did a very good job. But speaking of, diminished experiences, I had a very, very strong change of opinion from the first scenario to the second. The first scenario, the one that's suggested as the intro scenario, I played as the Sin. We did some rules wrong, but, that didn't really matter all that much in the end. And to be as polite as possible, the intro scenario is dumb as shit.
It blows my mind. I don't know whether it's a hangover from computer games. I assume that's what it is. But you have these family versions of the games, the simple versions of the game, the beginner version. Always play your first game using these rules, and they're always inevitably shit, simplistic, and completely undersell the game.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that the intro scenario does, in that the first time I played it, I was really underwhelmed. Since it wasn't my copy, we played with a friend of mine's, and it was his copy. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say how much I hated it. Right. Because, it's really mean if somebody pays a lot of money for a game. But I wanted to play it again with, keeping in mind that eventually we might end up reviewing it. And the second scenario was much better. And we picked up the one where you need to escort, what are they, innocents or something? Right. Innocent people. You see just sort of non-player characters from one end of the board to the other. And that was interesting because that gave you decisions to make. They give you priorities. You said, is this more important than this? Or should I do this first or that? The interest now is basically just, big battle royale. It's just, dice chugging for an hour. That's it. And seeing who dies and how often.
And the point is, in this game, the dice chucking, you do a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it is what dice chucking is. It's a resolution mechanic. And when you make that the center of the game, it's unfeasibly dull, right?
Yeah, because the resolution mechanic, while not just, roll more than 4 dots on this 6-sided die, while it's slightly more complicated, it's not that interesting. You pair symbols up with one another, you add dice, you remove dice, stuff like that. It's okay. It's fine. It's workable. It's serviceable. It has it screws probability in a nice way, sort of keeping you from trying to sort of math out what you can or can't do. It works. But like you said, if it's the only thing that keeps the experience going, it's going to be very, very, very dull. And if you end up playing all the interest scenario and feel this is a dumb game like I did, I highly recommend giving one of the later scenarios a try because they are very much more interesting.
So what do you get if you mix together sexual frustration, hatred of the world, and congenital stomach problems?
That's basically you.
That's design. So, on the face of it, this game is a dumb, fun, dice-chucking, Ameritrash tactical combat thing.
Well, not tactical, but yeah.
Well, no, it's absolutely tactical. The heart of it is tactics, not strategy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially...
No, I agree. Yeah, if you make this sort of pairs of opposite, yes, it's more tactical than strategic.
It's reactive, which is inherently tactical, right? But it has a couple of elements that I think are really clever, that are really innovative and interesting, and actually feed into the idea of the theme of the game. Mm-hmm. So briefly... The theme is that the world has been corrupted by these avatars of sin, and you are these people that are trying to fight off and destroy them before they completely engulf the world and it turns into a roiling Hieronymus Bosch hellscape, right? And
Trump Towers.
Yeah, pretty much American. And so basically you have this one mechanic which I think is really nice, and it's that thing that people want to extol the virtues of. Theme and mechanics tying in, right? And so you have this, as a player, you have these player boards, and you can choose to take corruption, which, showing you the effects of being in this place and how it is changing you and how the sin is seeping into your skin. But what that does in a game way is give you bonuses, and it helps you with the rolls, and it helps you with extra dice and buffs and all of these sorts of things. And I think that's really nice because what it does is not just say when you take corruption, this happens, but it says, You're choosing to do it. And so in the game world, it's someone saying, I'm allowing these things to affect me because it will give me more power. And in the game, in the physical playing of it, you're saying, I'm potentially, because if you can't take any more corruption, then you take hit points, you don't have a lot of hit points and you die quite easily. So you're saying, I'm pushing my luck, I'm taking that risk to try and achieve what I want. And it's those crunchy, potentially dangerous decisions where the enjoyment lies in games. And I think it's a really clever, nice decision.
I think from the sim player's perspective, this is really just a poison pill that most players don't realize they're swallowing whole.
Absolutely.
And that they're short-term gains that will basically inevitably lead to getting your character killed. Because once, in my experience, once a character had a certain amount of corruption, and it doesn't have to be full corruption, so to get you like really injured a lot with every symbol you hit, but just, halfway through, you just bombard them with characters who can corrupt them, push them to the end, and then basically you double your chances of hurting them with a single die. So as a sim player, this is really, you're just sitting there letting them throw away things that eventually will lead to victory, effectively victory points for you. So I think it's fascinating because as far as I understand it, from perspective of the team player, basically going, right, I need this advantage now. I need this quick hit. As a sim player, you're going, all right, more ways to win. And this is interesting because again, it sort of reinforces this asymmetric play experience because you're looking at different things as a sim player. You evaluate them differently. You can always jokingly at the table talk, no, go sin a little bit more. It'll be fine. There's a church over there. You can repent. Don't worry about it. But you know that you just need to swarm one guy, just, till they're dead. And then you get one step closer to winning the game. And it's, I think design wise, one thing I found quite interesting is how the balance swings over the course of the game. And it all hinges, I found, and I was a little disappointed by that. It all hinges on the equipment deck.
Right.
It all hinges on whether your characters get the right equipment, because that equipment basically determines whether the sim player will go after you or not. If you have a great equipment, but you end up sinning a lot, they will take you out just so they can get rid of your equipment. But, and this is the rule that we only realized was in play about 1/3 into our second game, once you have equipped your characters with a certain amount of equipment, you never lose it.
Right.
You lose the specific equipment, but if you have 4 cards, once your character dies, you get 4 new cards.
Yeah.
So basically this is a boost. This is a power up that is incredibly powerful. It affects the game far, far more than the sinning mechanic. Even though the sinning mechanic is much more seductive, what wins you the game is the equipment cards. And that was the point where I thought we haven't played all the scenarios, obviously. It might be different later. But this was a part where I was a little disappointed because once I realized that, the game sort of shifted away from this crazy, wild dice chucking fest with people blowing up or, killing lots of things, and became this rush to the supermarket to equip yourself to the teeth and then start, running over people.
Getting equipment is more difficult. Taking those little buffs from corruption is easier. So, what it is about restraint, about discipline on the part of you as a player and on the characters themselves that live within the game, which is quite nice, I think. But also, this is where I think this game beats a lot of other dungeon crawlers in that there's replayability through mechanics, not through scenarios. Mm-hmm. So I love Descent, but the thing with Descent, the replayability comes through the different scenarios and having different goals.
Right.
Whereas with this, it's about learning that nuance and that balance and about when to control your corruption, when to go and activate your region that will give you certain things, when and who to give the blessing to reduce that corruption and all of that thing. And it doesn't exist solely within your control of your own character, but also with the control of the team in itself. Right. And that's interesting. That offers depth and that offers heuristics and it offers mistakes to make that you don't make in subsequent games. And the hope is the sim player and the team players grow together and get better together.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to, I would have to play the game a few more times to sort of really settle on this now. But my impression is that once you realize how important equipment is, and once you realize that you need to stack up as soon as you can, at the beginning of the game, it's all about the sin player. It's all about rushing kills, rushing corruption, sort of push it to a point where you can actually threaten to overwhelm the team later on, even if they're fully equipped. If you're fighting against 3 or 4 fully equipped, or I think 3 fully equipped team members, you're going to have a hard time. If you put all your energy on one player, you might get a kill out of it while they pursue their objectives. But if you're already behind, the game's lost by that point. And I found this swing in every game I've played of this, and it starts off on one end, and as equipment is spread out, it swings to the other end. I need to play it more often to see whether this changes over time, whether things actually, once you know the game better, once you know the details a little, have a better grasp on the details, whether there's more flexibility in there, more variability, or if every game starts the same way. First, it's the sin rushing to win, and then it's the team trying to grasp these last points before the game is over.
Yeah, I think it seems to me that the game has depth, and it has this overlay of being a dumb sort of dice chucker, but actually there is, and I think it really does come down to this not knowing quite when the sin player is going to attack you.
That is the key to what makes this game work, definitely.
It's so clever and so interesting and so simple, actually, that it promotes that kind of teamwork and decision-making that is just so vital to the life of games like this, and I think this one pulls it off. So,
no, actually, 2 more points. Sorry. I agree. I would slightly disagree with you that I think it's a dumb game, but it is a dumb game in a very clever way. I think, like good dumb comedies, they work because there's quite a bit of thought put into it. At the end of the day, yes, it's all about dice chucking, it's all about surprises, it's all about, blowing things up, but it gets there, it provides this kind of experience through some very clever mechanics. And I agree with you. It's this, because the mechanics work, because they are dependable, because they provide interesting decisions, the dumbness of the experience is actually enjoyable and doesn't feel like frivolous, trivial waste of time.
I don't know if you've played with any other sins.
I think I've played with 2. I think the base sins, yeah.
And I think they actually offer different impediments to players. They're actually different. You have to make different decisions. Do they feel different? I wouldn't say they feel different particularly, but the tactical decisions you have to make based upon the penalties that those sins put on you makes you make different decisions, makes you act as a team differently.
I agree.
And so that's interesting too.
No, I agree. As a sim player, that was the experience I had as well. They don't feel fundamentally differently the way I would argue certain games feel a certain way, but they do change the type of decisions you make. But one thing I want to bring up now, because again, tying back to an earlier review, Perdition's Mouth, which I know I heavily criticized for its depiction of gruesomeness. How do you feel The Others handles its horror aesthetic?
Well, it's the thing with The Others is it's pretty gruesome. But what it feels like, in 2 ways it's different from Perdition's Mouth, I think. Firstly, it doesn't feel teenage. There's no sort of unbridled joy at just being disgusting for the sake of being disgusting. It's a world that is gruesome, that is grotesque, but it's much more of the burlesque than the torture porn. It doesn't revel in agony and the infliction of pain. What it revels in is the infliction of corruption and you ruining yourself, and it deals with that in a much more sophisticated manner than Perdition's Mouth does, so it is less distancing. Also, it helps. The art is better and they're less prone to just spraying everything with blood, so on a purely visceral level it's easier to deal with.
That's interesting, because I think it's very teenage, but it's teenage in a different way. I think or juvenile in a different way. It is so over the top, absurdly disgusting with these mouths, with these misshapen forms and these tentacles and gooey sort of torn up bodies. But it's so over the top, and I think the underlying aesthetic refers back to comic books, whereas something like Perdition's Mouth, at least at first glance, claims to some sort of reality, claims to be something that's realistic because they're actual recognizable body limbs on the floor. And you don't see, I feel that The Others exists in this over-the-top, absurd, pulpy, trashy kind of world
As
of
I
horror.
said, it's burlesque, isn't it?
Burlesque, yeah.
It's all sort of corsets and cheeky costumes and this utter decadence that is quite charming and attractive. What it isn't is repelling. I mean, you might not like the aesthetic, but it doesn't feel exploitative in the way that Perdition's Mouth does, right?
Yeah.
Perdition's Mouth feels like it revels in the torture of particularly women, whereas this feels like charming, more Aleister Crowley than Jeffrey Dahmer, right?
I'm not sure I would put them that far apart, but I do agree with you. There's a distinct difference between those two aesthetics. And I think one of them has a sense of humor about it, a sense of its own unreality, of its own absurdity, of its own over-the-topness. And the other, not the others, but the other game, in this case, Perdition's Mouth, feels earnest in its grotesque and disgusting ways. I think with The Others, I personally found them far more disgusting to look at, but it feels like a joke. It feels like the kind of thing that teenage boys do where they basically fart in each other's vicinity and try to get a rise out of each other.
You see, I think it's much more sophisticated than that, and it feels like a world in which you could sit in a bar and have a whiskey and this would be enjoyable, whereas Perdition's Mouth feels like one long riff on chopping off women's breasts. That's distancing. So, Georgios,
yes.
Should people go out and buy The Others 7 of the Simpsons?
It's a Simon game. As such, it is big, it is expensive, it comes with an absurd amount of expansions. I think the reason why I am not going to buy it, and I wouldn't buy it, is one of finances. I think it's fine as a game. I don't think it's a bad game in any stretch of the imagination. I don't think it's a game that it's eclipsed by so many other better games. I think it does what it does and does reasonably well. It's fun. And if you like the aesthetic, if you like the style, I think I can recommend this. But I don't like the pricing policy of Simon in this context, and paying attention to what's happening with the Rising Sun Kickstarter as well. I am not comfortable. At this point, I have over 150 games in my collection. At this point, I don't feel comfortable shelling out this much money for a game that's going to see a few plays, and that's it. But that's my personal situation right now. I'm at the point where I very, very carefully choose which games to put into my collection. If you are in a comparable spot and you just want any old dungeon crawler, maybe this is not the money hole you're looking for. If, on the other hand, you just like general style, aesthetic, I think as far as just the quality of the game is concerned, it's fine. It's better than fine. It's good.
You can see that you have a good designer whose intention was to make big, dumb fun.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is big, dumb fun that is rigorous and intelligently planned out, and therefore the game is interesting and it's good. It's expensive, no doubt, but if this is your thing, you like big, rambunctious, dice-chucking, dungeon crawly type tactical combat games,
Oh, that's a mouthful.
in which you get to chat a lot with the people you're playing with and you get to pit your wits against someone, this game is worth getting. It's witty, it's decadent, it's rambunctious, and fundamentally, it's pretty good. Well, I'm glad you're well again, Georgios.
So am I.
I'm glad the sores have healed.
My what?
Sores.
Ah, yes. My.
Those ones around your nosy woes that were weeping pus into your breakfast squirrel.
That was actually tears. I have a tear duct defect. Thanks for bringing it up.
On your nose?
No, on my eye. You need a glass.
You've got tear ducts on your eyes?
Yes.
How do you see anything?
Well, very, very hazy.
It must just be sad and watery your life the whole time.
Of course, yes.
Well, you know what'll make you feel better, Georgios?
Going home and having a good night's sleep?
People contacting us, and how would they do that?
All right. Well, they can write us an email at infoperfected@gmail.com. They can visit our website, which is infoperfected.com. They can Twitter at us at infoperfected or perfectedinfo. They can Instagram us, which is perfect information. They can talk to us on Facebook, which is Perfect Information, or they can visit us on Board Game Geek, which is the guild of perfect information.
And also, you can help us by telling your friends about the podcast, doing it on your podcast.
Tattle on us, yes.
You can go to the website and you can hit the support button. You can support us. And I'm going to reveal this for the first time, but we've been backwards and forwarding.
Backwards, forwarding, yes.
For about a year now, and we've been deciding, should we go into funding? And we didn't think it was the right time, and we felt that it would be demoralizing as much as anything. But we've decided that hopefully we have enough subscribers and we have enough goodwill that you might want to help us out. So in about a month, I'm not going to give an exact date because that would be absurd, we're going to start our Patreon. And basically what we want this Patreon to do is to cover our hosting, is to help us buy games to review, and also help us improve our equipment so we get better and we can go to cons and we can speak to people and we can network and we can develop relationships that makes the show better.
Also, I plan on developing a Coke habit, just to let you know.
And if you feel that Georgios's Coke habit is worthy of contributing to...
Oh, I will speak more, loudly, and faster.
With even more arrogance, if you can believe that.
Yes.
Then we'll keep you posted, we'll post links, but think about just chucking us a couple of quid a month, and, we can carry on, and maybe...
You can develop your Coke habit of your own.